Hello, my name is Chris Snipes, and you are listening to The Melt. There are corridors of quote-unquote reality that have no reference points except one's own first-hand experience and trusting the accounts of others' first-hand experiences. When I came up with the idea for this podcast last summer, I knew that I wanted to emphasize the importance of one's own experiences. In this world, before it was saturated with the media that we rely upon to deliver to us whatever confirmation that we might need to tell us that the world is one way or another, we had first-hand experiences and the telling of those first-hand experiences. Now, before we even entertain a concept as being worthy of even considering as possible, we often look to others to define the parameters of the fathomable for us. Many of us don't want to admit that the realm of scientific rationalism is just as rife with subjectivity and bias as anything else. I think that it's time to give more credence to first-hand experience and to the possibility of multiple subjective realities existing simultaneously. I find reality to be co-collaborative in nature. It requires that we participate in it rather than passively observe it. The fact that this isn't common knowledge leads some to believe that this occurs for a definite purpose. Masses kept blind to the fact that they have a much more important role in the bigger picture than they've been led to believe are masses that aren't liable to threaten the power structure anytime soon. Many think that we are hoodwinked to believe that what we perceive as reality is limited to what the 5 consensually acknowledged senses can perceive. If we think that this is all that there is, we will cease to look further. But we are evolving. We are realizing that not only are we all interconnected, but that there is a way to utilize this samsaric wheel of mundane existence and its cyclical tendencies to transcend the frequency that the purveyors of consensus reality would like to constrict us to, and to continue to refine our minds, bodies, and souls to transform into something as of yet unimaginable. Fortunately, we are sometimes granted with the opportunity to interact with someone who claims to have access to dimensions of our existence that almost seem ridiculously outlandish when seen within the rigid perspective of our mundane vantage point from within a grid of cubicles within a grid of cubicles, from our living room recliners to the aisles of our liquor stores. We convince ourselves that we just don't have the luxury of time that it would take to ponder any sort of reality outside of the electrical grid of our planet Earth. Yet today's guest, Tolec, speaks of being a part of something much larger than the rat mazes that most of the developed world exist in. It's a reality that includes time travel, intergalactic councils, alien races, and wars that have been going on for thousands of years that you very well may never have heard of. Tolec claims to be the Earth representative of the Andromeda Council. I start off the interview by asking what the Andromeda Council is and what is its function.
Okay. The Andromeda Council is a deep space, intergalactic and interstellar development body, if you will, of star systems and their senior homeworlds. And you can think of it as a deep space UN. That's the best way to think of it, as a really functional deep space UN. There are 12 senior members that have, of course, 12 senior homeworlds and senior star systems. And they're senior because they've simply been around longer as formal members of this this Deep Space UN. The founding member is the planet Ptola from the Arcturus star system, ninth dimensional beings. Their whole focus and vibratory rate is love, love, compassion, kindness, more love, more compassion, more kindness. I don't know the exact number. It's hard to put into words exact numbers, but multiple hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago, the Arcturian High Council had 4 star systems in their own, if you will, council. And they brought together 8 other star systems in a junior council, and together it formed what they actually ambassadors and diplomats of this council call in deep space. They call it the Galactic Council. Here on Earth, we call it the Andromeda Council because there are members from the Andromeda galaxy and Andromeda constellation. So you've got 12 senior homeworlds and another, I think, 139 junior members with junior status that just haven't been part of it as long. There are a few planets that are part of this council that are organic, like ours, that still function in this organic 3D vibratory rate. But most of them are 4D, 5D, all the way up through 9D that I'm aware of. And they have 12 biospheres, which are essentially artificially created planets of the size as small as I think it's Mercury, maybe. I haven't talked about this stuff in a while. And the largest one is about the size of Jupiter, that are comprised of and made of energy and matter of a higher vibratory rate. So that means that because they're at the higher vibratory rate, they can be in the same star space as we are without causing any problems. But there are 3 of them that are kind of watching our whole transformation process in and around the sun and the planet Earth. There are 3 of those biospheres. And there are another 9 that are surrounding this solar system, that are providing an energetic bubble, a protective force field, if you will, around this whole solar system as it goes through its changes. So there's some, as you would imagine, some pretty amazing technology and some pretty interesting beings. It's my understanding that I've had physical communication with the people that are my contact people from the council since I was 5 years old. They've told me that I've had in excess of 100 physical visits to these different biospheres, primarily for meetings, and countless meetings with them in the, if you will, in the soul or spirit essence form. You know, that the energy that animates these bodies that we have.
Sure.
Most people call it an out-of-body experience, but it's been a pretty amazing ride. I became first aware of them and my connection to them when I traveled back in time in 1993 with the guy who I now know is the commander of the primary Andromeda Council Biosphere. And I can give you as many details as you'd like to hear, or I can compress the story. I've told it so many times that
I know, and I hate to ask you again, but like I said, but if we could walk people through it, you don't feel the need to compress it. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. You know, as we were talking about earlier, when you have buddies you've known for a long time, think of that kind of scenario. I was, after having moved from New England to Tucson in the winter of 1991, I had done some work there. I was still in the healthcare software industry at that time. And a couple years later, in the late summer of 93, so it's late August of 93, so I'm in my early 30s, I was sleeping in my condo up against the Catalina Mountains, about 14 miles directly north of the city of Tucson. Still pretty much out in the country today. Now there's, of course, years later, and there's a lot of building that's gone on up there, but it's still up in the country and it's quiet. And so I'm deep asleep, and it's like about 20 or 4 in the morning, something like that. And it's kind of like getting a phone call, except that it was it wasn't coming through my ears. It was inside my mind. And I hear this voice, so I clearly recognize it's sort of like an old college buddy. Now he's not, but I recognize him that way. He's like, "Hey, listen, you got to get up." I'm like, "What? Do you know what time it is?" He's like, "Yeah, I know what time it is. I woke you up. You're sleeping. I need you to get dressed, get in your car, and head down I-10, Interstate 10, and take the exit before the San Javier Mission." I'm like, "At 4 in the morning?" "Yes, at 4 in the morning." He said, "Because," he's like, I need you to come with me. There's something important that I need for you to see, and I need you to join me." So I'm like, "All right, fine." You can ask questions. Go ahead.
Yeah. Was this the first thing like that had happened to you? I mean, did it catch you off guard?
Yeah, it's my first conscious memory of my first conscious experience. Now, because he said they'd been communicating with me since age 5. And I haven't talked about this too much, so I'll just mention this because it's relevant. If you talk to my mom at all, she'd tell you, "Oh yeah, he was a sick little boy, and when we brought him home, I had to nurse him back to health." I always thought that was like dear mom, mothering speak. Apparently it isn't. I've asked the guys about this situation, and they said, yes, the body that you have was very ill and sickly, and the soul that was in that body didn't have the spiritual robustness to keep your body animated. So you had a near-death experience at 1.5 years.
Wow.
I don't remember it because I was only 1.5 years,
Sure.
I was just a little kid. But
yeah.
So apparently there's a newer, stronger soul essence of a more durable and robust nature that would be able to do the job and handle everything that I've thrown at it in this lifetime. So I guess that's a marker. There are quite a few people who've had contact, who've become awakened, who have the kind of things we're going to talk about, the interest in these topics, that have had near-death experiences. Excuse me, most of them tend to be later in life. There's a car accident, or they fall, they're in a lake, or they're in a pool, or somebody pulls them out and they're brought back to life. Me, it was sort of like at night, and I was sleeping. One slipped out and the other one slipped in.
Wow.
But so to get back to the 1993 story, so I did as he asked. I had a 4-door car, leather loaded business vehicle. I sold it when I got to Tucson, and I bought an old beat up 1984 light blue Ford Bronco, 4-wheel drive. Like, I'm in the Southwest, the desert, I can go out in this thing. I hardly ever went out in the desert in the vehicle. Usually mostly when I walked. I took walks at night and late afternoon after work. So I hopped in this old beat up Bronco, and I drove down the interstate, and I pulled off onto the dirt road that he described to me. I drove about 1/4 to 1/3 of a mile into the desert, and I came through this little dip, this little decline, which was a wash area. Whenever it rains too much out here, they have things that are called washes. So you have no water, and then rain, and whoosh, all of a sudden there's a river. So it happened to be dry. It's late August. I drive through. I come up through the other side, very slight incline, and my eyes get really wide open, and I see this silver craft that's somewhere between like 35, 40 feet in diameter. And even today, my reaction surprises me, because I was like, wow, cool. And I hop out, the engine's running, the door's wide open, I'm waving at him like, hey, long time no see, great to see you again. And he's a bit impatient at this point, because he's like, come on, it's like, it's 20 after 5, it's going to get light soon. We got to go. I don't necessarily want the people from Tucson to see my ship parked out here. So I'm like, oh, it's great to see you. He's like, come on. So I finally shut the door and I walk over to him and he gives me a hug. Now this guy's, he looks like a tall, good-looking Native American guy. He's got dark hair that's pulled back. He's about 7'4". So I'm barely 5'10". Right?
Oh, wow.
He's like, hi, So he goes, but before we go, you got to take one of these little pills. And the pill looked like what we could describe as an old school, like NyQuil caplet, like that blue-green color. I said, okay, why? He's like, well, because to travel through time, we've got to change your vibratory rate because a 3D organic human, you can't travel through time. You burn up. Now, I imagine that I probably walked through some kind of technology as I walked in the ship as well, to sort of adjust my vibration. But
sure.
That was the beginning of the, we got to adjust you so you can make this trip. I remember leaving the planet's surface. I don't at all remember traveling through space. I remember seeing the darkness of space. I don't remember traveling through space because while I'm sort of sitting in this chair, kind of relaxing, he's doing is I could see that he's thinking, and he's just kind of touching basically what we would call today like a flat screen, flat panel plasma display or else LED or whatever. And next thing I know, we are in Earth space, either Western Virginia or Kentucky, and it's in the 1840s. There are no lights on the eastern seaboard. When we got there, we arrived sort of like early morning and it was daylight, but there are no perceivable lights at all because it's the 1840s.
How did you gather that? Just by the surroundings, or did he?
I asked him.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I asked him. I said, okay, well, this looks like Earth. He said, yeah, it is. I said, so what's the date? What time? I said, what time is it? He gave me the time. He said, what's the date? He said, 1840s. I went, huh? So I took that trip 3 times. So that morning and then 2 other additional mornings within a week and a half. And for each of those trips 1 through 3, we stayed in the ship, and although at a greater distance, much like you're looking at me today, mm-hmm. He and I were observing a family of 4. A young dad who was like 33 or 34 years old, maybe 35 at the oldest, a mom who was somewhere between 26 and 28, a son that was 9 or 10, and a daughter that was 3, 4 at the oldest. And on the 3rd trip, the daughter perished in a barn fire because of smoke inhalation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was not a parent when I saw that situation, and I've not yet been a parent in this lifetime, but it profoundly affected me to watch the tragedy of not only learning that this young girl had passed, but the grief on the face of the father. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, the mother was beyond tears, but the grief on the face of the dad was palpable. And I thought, how, even today, when I think about that moment and any other times when you lose somebody important to you in life. We lost Dad about 10, actually it'll be 10 years ago this month. But I could not imagine the grief of that young man losing this beautiful little girl, the sort of the jewel of his eye, his child. And I looked at this gentleman, who I now know is the commander of the Andromeda Council biospheres. I said, out of all of the events in this first major contact that you wanted to have with me, why this one? I mean, I know it's profound, but it's also profoundly sad. He said, you know us, we know you. You are originally from our planetary system in the Pleiades, and you're one of us. We know you very well, and we we can trust you. We can trust your reactions. And there are going to be some events in the near future of your planet that will radically change the composition and the numbers of the people on your planet. There are going to be a number of Earth changes. And in order for us to better help your people on planet Earth, we've got to do a better job of understanding the breadth of your emotion. And, you know, and I've always kind of used this model, but let's say the emotional breadth and scope of Earth humans is 0 to 50. We experience all of it like a sine wave. Up, down, up, down, up, down, and the full breadth of it, 0 to 50. With them, their emotional and spiritual development is so advanced that their breadth of experience is more like 22 or 25 to like 35 or 40. And the ripples are a lot smaller. They're not these big sine waves. They're just smaller ripples. And so they don't feel as deeply or dramatically as we do. One of the reasons that they don't is that they've been higher dimensional humans for so long, they don't remember what organic death, the experience of organic death is like. And for example, for him, now some of them have taken organic human form. He's never reduced his vibratory rate. He's continuing to move up. Matter of fact, when I met him, he was upper level 4D. Now he's like 5.2 or 5.3, fifth dimensional. He said, because we don't experience death, emotionally, we don't go through loss and tragedy and grief. And he said, it's obviously disturbing you. It's disturbing this young man. A lot of cultures think of this simply as a passing. Maybe you take off a suit. I'm going to use some of my descriptions. A suit, a raincoat, a jacket. You simply put another one on. Not for you here on planet Earth. It's highly disturbing for you guys. I'm like, yeah, it is. There were 3 topics intertwined with that whole conversation, but the upshot of it was those experiences were because there are some times coming that will bring dramatic change to this planet. And they and other advanced races want to be as ready as possible in order to be able to help us. And so that's what that experience was all about. That's not the only time that I have a memory of being with some people other than Earth humans. There's another experience. There were like 3 in a row in the early to mid 90s where I said, this is not normal. I'm a kid, trying to make it in life. My career was going pretty good, but it changed everything in life. I was like, hard left. Hey, you're going this way now. And there's another experience which is pretty profound, which I'll tell you about. It's my understanding that, and as a matter of fact, they still exist. If you look at Arizona and if you look at Tucson as an example, Tucson as a metropolitan area is pretty much shaped like a vertical rectangle. That's the shape of the Tucson area. And it also has mountain ranges on all 4 corners: northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast. Based on what they've told me, there are 4 benevolent ET bases at each one of the 4 corners. They've been there for years. I was, again, what I thought was a deep sleep. It's hard to determine what it was, but I remember waking up from what I thought was a deep sleep 1 year later in September of '94, in almost a state of shock. And sort of, if you're sick and you have a fever and there's kind of like a cold sweat, I was healthy. I woke up disturbed, kind of anxious and in a cold sweat, which is rare for me. There's not much that shakes my world. I'm pretty solid. And all I can tell you is what I remember leading up to that point. I was in a ship. I was in one of the Andromeda Council local ships being given a tour that had come from one of the local bases locally in the Tucson area at that time. And I don't know, 14 or 15 people of different races were being given a tour on this ship as it was traversing the greater Tucson area. We were going from west to east, heading toward the Reddington Pass area. And the gentleman who was giving the tour would be considered an XO, an executive officer, kind of Star Trek's version of number one. And a very white-knuckled, flushed-faced young ensign came running up to him, and he started to have this whispering conversation in his ear, and I could hear part of it. And he basically said, "Sir, we've got real problems. We're going to go down. We're going down." And the XO said, "That's not possible. This ship was retrofitted recently and upgraded. There should be nothing wrong that this ship can't handle." He said, "No," he said, "you don't understand. What we've learned is there's a problem down in engineering. I'm not a scientist, so I'll explain this as best I can. They had some kind of gyro in the lower area of the ship, which would spin and keep everything stable. And that gyro had gone out of whack. And they would have had to get out of Earth space, go to a space dock, park it. They would have to get to it to repair it, and that wasn't going to happen. So the ship started to pan like right and left and then kick forward, and it started to head down at a fast rate of speed. And I remember seeing young men, women, children running around screaming, like afraid for their lives, running around screaming. And the ship had pitched even farther down. I wake up in this cold sweat, anxious, feeling profoundly sad. So get up, go to the bathroom, throw some cold water on my face, go back to bed. Wake up around 7:30 or so. I remember the experience. Shower, shave, put on suit, coat, and tie, go to work. About 4:30 that day, I said, all right, the bulk of my work is done. I had spent some time visiting with some people. I didn't know why, but I found this information interesting. I decided in the first year that I would attend some local mutual UFO network meetings. They're called MUFON. And Tucson had a pretty big chapter at that time. It was they used to get between like 50 and 65 people every month.
Wow.
They'd have a new speaker in. Ted Lohman, Jim Nichols, and Peggy Kane produced a local television show called UFO AZ Talks. We got 55 to 65 people to show up for that thing once a month on a Friday night. So I met a lot of people. And one of the people I met was Roger Scher. He was the assistant state section director for Pima County for MUFON at the time. I befriended Roger, and I called him at like 4:30-ish p.m. and said, "Hey, Raj, you got a free moment?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." So I told him the same story verbatim that I just told you and everybody else. And he said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, of course I'm sure." And then he said, "How many people have you repeated this story to?" I said, "Raj, nobody. You know me. I'm working. I'm responsible. I wanted to get through my day and get all of my things out of the way so that this time of the day could come and I could finally pick up the phone and call you. And I thought you'd have a handle on knowing something about this, or you might have an explanation for some of this." Or he said, "Are you sitting down?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in my office. I'm in my chair." He said, "I got a phone call." And I guess he got one, if not two phone calls from people that were MUFON field investigators. They had called him early, like 3:30-ish in the morning, and told him about like a small convoy movement, which they described as a crash retrieval team of vehicles, because a ship had crashed in the Reddington Pass area. There were 127 beings on board, and there were 125 lives lost.
Wow.
That explains, I was like, what? So that explains my sense of profound, loss and anxiety and the cold sweat. They obviously yanked me out in time so that I was, I was okay. Wow is exactly it. Those two experiences were the most profound I think I've ever had with them, because in both situations, I was experiencing emotion. I was affected emotionally. I was profoundly sad, one consciously and one unconsciously, because it was in the the interdimensional sleep state, which was really my soul essence that was out of the body on board the ship having the experience, and before the crash they yanked me back out from the end.
Would your soul essence be sort of like your astral body?
Yeah, you could say it that way. Yeah. It's I call it the either the soul essence or the spirit essence that when we are young organic human children in a female a woman's womb, sometime before we're born, whether it's 1 month or 2 months or 3 weeks or 3 months, our spirit essence, that slice of our soul, enters her and enters us as babies, and we're born. I've heard sometimes it can be like a day or two before, and we're born. But it's what makes you, Chris, uniquely you as the person you are today, and likely other lifetimes. There's certain elements of you that will never change from lifetime to lifetime. You are who you are. As a matter of fact, each human on this planet has his or her own unique vibratory rate. Yours could be like 1477956.240, and mine might be 1279665.70. You can be tracked because you have a unique vibratory signature. And even governments, plural, some of the advanced governments have learned about this and know about this these days. So it's something that's now being openly discussed. As well, each star system, each star, and each planet has its own, if you will, digital signature, its own vibratory rate. So things in this physical universe, even though they might not appear to be, they are quite alive due to energy, and energetic frequency. These are a lot of things that I've learned over the course of years as I've had these experiences.
Sure.
Yeah.
So is part of the function of the Andromeda Council to sort of help to usher us through this ascension, to get us to a higher place, or is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, there have already been selected 4 member planets. I haven't talked about this in a while. Ventra, Nicote, Tolec, and Retol. One of the races is really pasty white. So first of all, they're all tall. I think the tallest race gets upward of 7'6", 7'8". The shortest one is probably 6'2", 6'3", roughly. They're each race has its own coloring. As an example, one race is sort of that ubiquitous universal color of cream. You take coffee and put a bunch of cream in it, and they're out of the 3 planets, they're the only planet of those 3 where actually 3 races colonized this particular planet, and they all intermarried. So you've actually got a planet somewhat like Earth, of interracial people. And that's one of the reasons why they are coming. And there are 3 other planets where you've got this really pasty white people. Another group, they look like the fictional Vulcans from Star Trek, except that instead they're like a light green color, and they've got the bobbed ears. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Another group of people, I think they're like a lavender, a purple color. So there will be 3 Andromeda Council non-voting member diplomats. Ambassador Tanka, who's the actual ambassador from my home planet to planet Earth. Diplomat Maka, he's the diplomat from my home planet and the council to North America. So you've got Canada, Mexico, and the US. And then Vice Chairwoman Tanya. The 3 of them are going to be sort of like an advance party, letting the people of Earth know that these people from these 4 races, at pretty much the moment of the highest level of Earth changes on this planet that will be taking place, at the apex of those changes, at pretty much the highest possible spiritual and cognitive evolution of the people on this planet. When those 2 meet, that's when the essence of this world is supposed to change. And we're supposed to go from being organic, like we are today, to being made out of fine essence matter, crystalline energy.
Would that be 4D?
Right. Sort of like 4.6, 4.7, and then sometime, we don't have the language for this, but sometime after that, because apparently we're in this process right now of beginning to December 21st, 2012 was supposed to be the beginning of the deterioration of time. That's why you've heard people recently talk about, timelines are coming together. Well, they're coming together because ultimately there's one sort of predominant path of evolution that a planet or a star and or a people will take, because throughout the course of its evolution, it sort of comes, if you will, back to center. There's an alignment that happens, and that's what's going on with us. We're because of the energies we're being exposed to, we're coming back into alignment. So we're supposed to evolve into becoming a higher dimensional people and a higher dimensional world and beings and all sorts of different capabilities like clairaudience and clairsentience and clairvisual abilities. I mean, certainly the new human, the new illuminated human, if you will. Interestingly enough, that doesn't abrogate the need for us to stop doing work on ourselves, because there's so many people out there who are like, oh, we're going to become higher dimensional humans. It's like, like the fairy waves her magic wand.
Yes.
No. The change of composition from organic carbon-based matter to a higher dimensional form does not abrogate the need or desire or wish to evolve emotionally and mature emotionally. I've said for years that, and I think, unfortunately, I'm somewhat accurate. If you look at the greater collective of humans on this planet, we're like a bunch of 6th grade schoolyard bullies.
Oh, yeah.
And I hate admitting that, but as a member of this human race on this planet, there are so many ways that we are still highly immature as a race. And some people won't be able to survive that evolutionary step up on this planet. And they'll simply go and they will incarnate on other organic 3D worlds so that they can continue their education in grammar school. As a way to speak. Yeah. Other people are ready, and I'm doing the best job I can to explain what I've learned.
Sure, sure.
If I think that if you sat a few of us down, and a few of us have in different conversations, collectively and individually, you'd probably hear similar stories in terms of who we are and the level of evolution that we're at collectively as a human species. There are a bunch that will make it. There's some that won't. It's just what's going to happen is going to happen based on each individual person's choice and desire to evolve and grow and transform. You know what it's like.
Yeah, of course, definitely.
Yeah.
You
Go
reach
ahead.
you reach an epiphany, and it changes your way that you look at things, and you realize that the way that you were before was very small-minded, and you expand, and then you just kind of keep
Oh
doing that
yeah.
rung by rung, and
Yeah.
that's how evolution happens. But what are some of the things that that people can do? I mean, yes, we all have our own individual paths, but are there things that just anybody can do to help to raise, to make a fertile ground for that vibration to raise higher?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a great question, and it's relevant. Anytime anyone asks this question, and I have always said, the easiest thing that you can do. Now, I know it's a challenge for people that are, living in the heart of Atlanta or the heart of Baltimore or the heart of New York City or Boston. But having said that, even those cities have some suburban areas with parks. And the bottom line is, whoever you are, wherever you live, I've always believed and found it even true for myself that the more time I spend out in nature, the more I can quiet my mind. And as a way of speaking, do a better job of working from my heart space and my intuitive space. Because as we live in this world, which can be very intellectual and very mental, the brain is always, brain's always going.
Mm-hmm.
And the brain is really good for figuring out stuff, but I believe, I've come to learn that it's really lousy for making good decisions between right and wrong. The intuitive self, the heart-based self. And this is not my thesis. There are a lot of really more wise people that have come to this decision than I have. But I've studied under people who studied under Gary Zukav, and he's just an incredible, if you will, spiritual teacher. And he even tells a story that he was going through a difficult time. As a matter of fact, I even think he told the story on Oprah one time. So he's telling Oprah the story. He's in his late 50s, kind of where I am right now. And he's telling the story about when he was in his early 30s and he was going through some very dynamic, challenging moments in his life. And he was talking to a man he called his uncle. This uncle happened to be a sage, wise, older Native American. And so this Native gentleman listens to Gary's story of woes, and he waited for him to finish. And I love this story because it's so simple and it's so profound in its result. He looked at me and said, "My son, the longest journey you will take is from here." And then he brings his finger down to his heart and he says, "To here." And that was, I heard that story in my, it was my late 30s. And I was like, wow, that's where I need to go. I need to go back to that to become a better person.
Yeah, and it seems like that's I mean, even like Buddhism, Eastern philosophy talks about that too, kind of quieting your mind and letting other things come to the surface.
Yes. Yeah. And you're right. And when we do quiet our minds, it's a lot easier to not only discern the difference between right choices and wrong choices, good choices and bad choices for each one of us, but it's also a lot easier to allow things that maybe we had been, our minds had been working on, the answers just kind of bubble up.
Mm-hmm.
And when they bubble up to the surface, you don't have to ask the question again. You know the answer.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's been a profound way to grow for me. Um, and I'm just one guy having a unique set of experiences, but it's introduced me to a world of people like you and Mark Kimmel and Greg Carlwood of Higher Side Chats. Uh, uh, um, let's see, Alexis Brooks from Higher Journeys, Dr. Marie Batchelor from down in Australia. I mean, it's just been an just incredible, incredible experience because there I'm in my mid-30s and my life goes, you're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, that's great. It's cool
Yeah.
that we have this sort of technology and way of communicating and connecting and drawing more people into this sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
flurry of ideas and expansion and growth, and it's fantastic.
And as I mentioned, I was visiting with some friends yesterday, friends I hadn't seen in years, and we had a variety of conversations. And Steve on my far left, he was like, "Wow, this is fantastic." Now, Steve had been in Phoenix, in the greater Phoenix area years ago. He went to the Thunderbird School of Business. He got his grad degree. So he spent, a year and a half here, but he doesn't live here.
Mm-hmm.
He spends his time split with his wife between Delaware and North Carolina. And he said, he's like, "Do you guys always have conversations like this?" And Don and I looked at him and said, "This is standard fare. We talk about this stuff all the time out here." And he was like, "Wow, that's cool." Because, the East Coast is not that way. The East Coast is about money, power, education, stability, money, power, education, stability, over and over and over again. Oh yeah, and politics and money and power.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that's on purpose? I mean, do you think different areas?
It's the vibration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the vibration. The South has a if you will, a softer, a more gentle vibration.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more about, if you will, of course, this is not taking into account the problem of slavery that we had in this country, but just in general, when you go, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, when you go farther south toward the equator, people tend to be more exuberant, more open-hearted, more lively. And you talk to the people in Europe who know the people closer to the Mediterranean as compared to the people who live in Germany or Russia. They go, "Oh yeah, there are differences," But it's that kind of thing. Here in the U.S., we have great geographical and cultural diversity, even in one country.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go from Maine and New Hampshire and Massachusetts all the way to the tip of Florida, great diversity. The one thing that they found is consistent is that no matter which part of the country you live in, the people in the cities talk faster, move faster, and think faster.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the farther out you go from the city, things slow down.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if that has to do with the amount of stimulus that you're surrounded
Probably.
by. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just that you have to, interact with and collaborate with. And so, okay. So what is your position on the council? Are you like the Earth representative of the Andromeda Council? Or one of many?
Yeah, I know I'm one of a few. There's an organization. So you have this parenthetical deep space intergalactic UN. It's got the senior members, and the junior members take responsibility because the junior members don't have ambassadors or head diplomats. The senior members do, but the junior members don't.
Mm-hmm.
So the junior members take responsibility for subcommittees and sub-councils. And there's a council that's already been established up on the primary Andromeda Council Biosphere. It's called the Joint Earth Council. And it has been created as a means of preparing the people of the Andromeda Council for its near future interactions with the people on Earth. And it's my understanding that there is going to be an equally created, equally adjudicated joint Earth Council here located in the United States, which will be the, if you will, brother body to the one that's in the Andromeda Council Biosphere. Because, and this piece is actually really important, at some moment in the future story of our planet, and it will change considerably, there will be less people, when we finally function as, if you will, an adult, emotionally adult, mature human race of great diversity on one planet, living in peace. There are no warlets, there are no wars, there are no skirmishes. We're all living in peace. We will be invited to join what's called the Galactic Federation and the Council, because we'll finally be grown up enough to take on the responsibilities of being a contributing member to a galactic body like that. Mm-hmm. They make sure not to invite races that are still immature and haven't grown up. And right now we're a mess. We're learning and growing, but we're still a mess because we're still fighting over oil and gold and precious metals and natural gas and land.
And the money taking, having to be involved in every interaction. And to me, money has always been like a major indicator that we aren't quite evolved past a certain point, Do you see it that way at all?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's my understanding that at some point, and this is where actually, it may not seem like it, but this concept of digital currency, whether you call it Bitcoin or any other one, mm-hmm. is actually the beginning of the migration from a world economy and way of living based on the generation of capital, and therefore the need to supply capital for everything, to a system which is essentially, I help you, you help me. I've got peaches, you need them. Mm-hmm. You have wheat, I need wheat. Or she needs rice, we'll give them some rice. Eventually, it will be just a system of sharing, barter, trade across the whole planet. But it's going to take some time for us to get there. But that's ultimately, that's where we're going. Because it's my understanding that all of the, whether it's junior or senior status, all of the 150 some odd plus members of the council, none of them use money. Between the technology they have and the resources they have, they just either create it or they trade for it. It's
makes sense.
Yeah, and it's not to say that there aren't other councils out there. There are. I think what makes this one unique is that, and I finally figured this one out, and it's only within the past couple of years, this council is sort of like the grandmother council to all of the mother councils. So you have the High Procyon Council, its own diplomats. The High Sirius A Council, its own diplomats. The High Betelgeuse Council, its own diplomats. The senior members of the Andromeda Council is the mother council of all of those high councils. So you've got the top ambassador from each one of those high councils that serve on this council, which is, it speaks loudly to the kind of responsibility that these people carry, mm-hmm. In making sure that the safety and the well-being and the food and the culture and the education and the music and all of those things can proliferate in a safe environment across all the council's affiliated worlds. It's pretty amazing. I was at a concert once on an Andromeda Council biosphere, and there was music being created because you could hear it. You could hear it internally. But thousands of people sitting watching this artist, and she was using her hands to create in space, in space in front of her, what we on planet would call 3D space.
Wow.
So essentially using energy to create imagery as she was creating music at the same time. It was phenomenal. It was an amazing experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been quite a quite a ride.
Well, have you been involved with this council throughout lifetimes? Is this just your most recent interaction? This goes back a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done this work. I've had this job to do, apparently. It's been thousands of years. It's my understanding that I've come to this planet. I don't know exactly how many lifetimes, but I've been coming to this planet for 75,000 years. As an example, I can tell you that Vice Chairman Tanya, if you looked at her, you'd say, oh, good-looking girl from Norway or Sweden, 6'2" or 3", true blonde hair, crystal green eyes. Nice, you'd say nice, good-looking Norwegian girl. Her people come from the Merak star system. Her people, 6,000 years ago, settled in what is now called the Skagerrak Strait, south of Norway and Sweden. It's now in the strait, which is underwater, but at that time it was above water. And they mingled with the locals at that time, and if you will, they became the Norse gods of old. And if you go back, anybody does any research, these people just sort of appeared. Who are these tall, blonde-haired gods? They weren't gods. They were just highly evolved humans that were quite tall. Because at that time, the natives in that area were like 4'6", 4'8", barely 5 feet tall. These people show up, they're like 6'7", 6'8", 7'2". Blonde, broad-shouldered, long line. Wow. And they had to do a considerable job hiding all their technology. So they knew they were different, but they didn't know that the locals didn't know they had all this technology. The people that you would consider to be the Native Americans west of the Rocky Mountains, they all came from my home planet called Dakota in the Tegeta star system. The same place that this guy who's the commander of the biosphere is from. About 50,000 years ago.
That name in and of itself sounds Native American.
Yeah. They're the Genesis race for the Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, Comanche, Apache, Cherokee. The list goes on and on. They actually, they first emigrated to a base kind of like what people would call Lemuria in the South Pacific. And with all the earth changes that happened down there, they migrated up the Asian coast, across Alaska, down into Canada, and then down into what we call the US, about 50,000 years ago. I was having this conversation with somebody of Lakota heritage, and he said, how do you know this? It's like, only our medicine men are supposed to know. He said, you're right. Our people got here about 50,000 years ago from the Pleiades. I'm like, okay. So when they're going to go toe-to-toe with them? I'm like, good. All right. Thanks for the confirmation.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, cool. Yeah,
well, so there is a connection with a lot of indigenous peoples and intergalactics, isn't there?
I can't attest for anybody east of the Rockies, but the people west of the Rockies, they definitely came from the planet Dakota. And if you look at natives from what we today call Virginia or Rhode Island or Massachusetts or Maine, they look a lot different from the natives in the West, which actually look a lot different from the Inuit, up around the North Pole. As an example, for some reason, the Hopi don't talk or look anything like the Navajo at all. Nothing. So there's all sorts of interesting things have happened. There's a mythical story about people called the Anasazi, which essentially is, if they translate it, it's the ancient ones who were enemies of the Navajo, basically. And they disappeared. There's like the whole race, the Anasazi. There's evidence of their pueblos and things, but gone, all of them.
Crazy. Like the Mayans? I mean, the Mayans could have disappeared too.
Like
They?
the Mayans, yeah. Some of the Lakota and others talk about people from the underworld that look like ant people, tall, skinny, spindly arms and legs, not unlike what people would describe as today's tall grays. So there's all sorts of mythology within a number of Native American stories and lore that talk about interaction with beings. As a matter of fact, I've got a book that I've chosen to read, written by a gentleman, I think by the last name of Ortiz, first name Eduardo, and one other guy. They've been writing Native American books for a while, and it's a compilation. It's about three inches thick. It's a compilation of Native American stories, what we call the U.S. and Canada, of the different people, and they all have creation stories that all sound different, but almost every one of them talk about their ancestors from the stars quite openly. Yeah, very, very openly. It's the Hopi, the Zuni, they all talk about their star ancestors. They had star charts. They're like, oh yeah, look, see, this is where they come from. They were talking about lights in the sky.
The Dogon in Africa, knowing about,
the Dogon come from, the people we look at today and say, oh, you're African. Even an African American, you could say, oh, you're African. Well, yeah, on this planet, but that's not where they're from. They're from the Sirius star system.
And you say that's one of the things that makes our planet very
unique.
Like almost like unique. That's a better way of putting it.
Very unique.
There's people from all different places here.
I don't know whether you heard this or not, but I was having a conversation with Wendell Stevens, who I'm fortunate to count as a friend for many years. And we were having a similar conversation on a Saturday morning in Tucson. And I said, Wendell, I don't get it. Why? Because Wendell had written a book. Wendell had written, I believe the number is in excess of 26 hardcover books and others regarding in excess of 125 races that he was aware of that had been visiting planet Earth. This is back in the mid-90s when he and I were talking.
Wow.
And I said, what is it with this planet? The first thing he said was, I'm not so sure that human beings, were ever supposed to habitate this planet long term, because this planet originally was supposed to be simply a repository of a great diversity of life. So it's like, we're on planet Z somewhere, and we go, hey, we've just lost these 3 species. Let's go to Earth. They have some. It's a repository of, and Wendell continued to say, he's like, hey, just consider the great numbers of insects, and then the diversity within the insect kingdom, and then fish and the diversity in the fish kingdom, including the stuff we haven't even discovered yet, animals, now humans. Been thousands of races of life, if you will, life forms. And certainly many races of humans that have inhabited this planet. Alex Collier says that we have at least 22 unique, if you will, humanoid races on this planet that we come from royalty, because we come from the best to come across the cosmos. I know that there's probably at minimum 6 or 7. As you look out and you see the difference between, the Norwegians and the Swedes, and down the other end of the scale, the Africans and then the Chinese or Japanese. great differences in all of those people. How they live, how they act, how they function, how they approach life. So yeah, a planet of great diversity. B, we got a lot of water. We've got a lot of water. We have a lot of minerals. The bad guys, they've been coming here for years to take gold. And they don't take gold because it's valuable because it's gold. They take gold because they use it to power their ships, and it can be chemically, if you will, transformed to create atmospheres for small planetoids. They can create like an energetic atmospheric bubble around a planet as it travels through space. Gold is the product they've used to create that. That's its real value.
I've heard that in the context of sort of an Anunnaki agenda. Like,
yes.
Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I've heard that.
Yeah. Like we were almost genetically engineered to mine gold from the earth for that purpose.
Yes. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we were, very early versions of humans were not meant to speak, to think, to have active sentience and consciousness. We were meant to be, for lack of better words, advanced worker apes, in the mines.
And so I always am curious as to why higher dimensional entities would want to study us, but perhaps it's for that reason, because we're sort of we weren't supposed to be this way.
Yeah. Well, the first answer is, at least according to in terms of my own perceptions. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. I believe the first answer is because, as an example, and I'll tell a brief story and then I'll continue. Apparently, I've been a student of time many lifetimes as I've come onto this planet. And within the past 7 or so years, and I don't remember exactly when, but I think it was like about 4 years ago, I said to this gentleman who's my primary contact, I said, I understand that I've been a student of time for many years and many lifetimes. And I've asked you this question every time, but I've grown a little. So this time I'm going to ask the question from a completely different perspective. And I could tell he's watching me and measuring me as I'm composing this question. I said, so this time I'm going to ask it from your perspective. Like his eyebrow went up. You tell me, I've been coming here for 75,000 years and living these different lifetimes on this planet. It's like, that's correct. And so from my perspective, an Earth human perspective, I've been coming here for 75,000 years. That's correct. I said, now, I would like for you to tell me, using the English language, using Earth English language, from your perspective, since you know me, and I come from the planet Dakota, and I've been shuttling back and forth doing this mission for a whole bunch of lifetimes and on the biospheres, et cetera, et cetera. He's like, yeah. From your perspective, roughly, using this rough language we have called English language, how long does it feel like to you guys that I've been gone? And he said, you would call it like a 1.5-year business trip. I went, what? Right, it's exactly what?
Wow.
75,000 years as we would compute organic time. Because we have the sun, the planet. Most people think it's the sun that creates the planet creates the gravity. Gravity creates time. When you leave this planet and go into space, actually time slows down and just stops.
Yeah.
Stops in deep space. There is no time. You just exist. So I'm like, 1.5-year business trip I've been gone? He goes, yeah, that's kind of you asked for a comparison. That's, using your terminology, that's how long we think of you as being gone. They're like, you can take a little while longer. I'm like, oh, no, I'm done. I'm done. No. So yeah, I use that as a point of reference for the following. these organic lives are so relatively short. And, let's say you and I live to maybe be 75 or 80 or 85. In the grand span of the universe, of the cosmos, it's like that.
Oh, yeah.
Literally a finger snap fast. And so consequently, I'm of the understanding there's all sorts of beings floating around in spiritual form or in other places that want their ticket punched to come here for 35 years, 40 years, 12 years, 80 years, whatever it is, because they can learn a whole bunch in a real short period of time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, sort of the country way of saying it. But yeah, they can learn a lot in a very short time span.
Yeah, and it's such a tricky place. It's such a tricky school to be in because, I mean, we're surrounded by all this media and the stories that we grew up around telling us, like, especially science coming along and telling us that
Yeah.
everything that exists, we have to be able to see it. We have to be able to measure it, and that's all there is. And then you got one life, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's such an illusion.
Yeah,
it feels like such
right.
a trick.
Right. Or if you listen to I'm not suggesting that you do, but you listen to the churches. The Western Christian churches. There's heaven, there's down here, and there's hell, and there's purgatory. And as I mentioned before, when we were talking, the Catholic Church, higher up people in the Catholic Church, just made an announcement this year, in this year of 2018. They officially said, hell doesn't really exist. We created it as a means to, and they backed into the words of, to control people. We needed a way to provide a sense of differentiation between where you've come from and how you should ethically live. I'm paraphrasing, but they created the concept of hell.
That's amazing. To admit that is amazing. Like,
it's surreal. I mean, that's a huge departure.
Exactly.
I don't know how many people have heard it, but if somebody were to make that broadcast across, let's see, the UK, the US, and Canada, you'd have a whole people going, "What? What did they just say?" And then everybody would start asking a whole bunch of questions. You can be sure there'd be people like battering down the dorms going, "All right, so what else did you lie about?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what's in the Vatican files, and like the Third Secret and aliens, and come on. I'm sure there's so much stuff in the Vatican that would just be mind blowing. I'd love to rifle through that for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not so sure they want us going through it, but
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We would know we would see the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, don't look here. There's nothing here.
Yeah, nothing to see here. Just some guy in a dress.
Yeah.
Is there something higher up than the Andromeda Council? Do they take their cues from someplace else?
Good question. I don't know. It is because, as I said, here on Earth they're known as the Andromeda Council or Andromedan Council. In deep space they're known as the Galactic Council. I can tell you that when Corey Goode refers to the sphere being alliance, sphere, biosphere, I can tell you that 50% of the spheres that he's talking about are comprised of Galactic Council biospheres that have been in and around Earth space and protecting this star system for a while now. So
that's the big blue spheres that he's talking about.
Yeah, spheres, biospheres, and people live inside them instead of on the outside. I've got a diagram sometime that I'll show you. There are multiple floors that are separated by miles. They have lakes, streams, parks, mountains, if you will, small seas. I mean, imagine people, instead of living on, but living inside a planet that's at minimum the size of Mercury, and I think the biggest one, like I said, is the size of Jupiter. So they're huge. There are on the Andromeda Council biosphere, the primary one. They have to make vibratory adjustments for people and beings that are 60, 70, 80, 90, so that they can somehow communicate and collaborate with all of the others.
Sure.
It's daunting to have them all do that.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be quite a bit of choreography to make
Yeah.
all of that work.
Yeah.
While we're at that, maybe you could describe maybe what some of the differences are between the different 4D, 5D, 6D.
Yeah. I can tell you that with 4D, we don't need an organic body to travel. We can travel energetically anywhere across this planet. My understanding is that once you get beyond like mid-level 5D and up, you no longer need technology to travel the cosmos. You can just shrink yourself down into a ball of light, otherwise known as orbs, and go traveling the cosmos without any technology needed at all. And that's, like I said, it's probably from like the mid-level 5D and up. Most life from that level and higher is energy, it's consciousness, it's light. The higher you go, the faster it vibrates. It becomes almost plasma. It's intelligent. And of course, the higher you go, also you get to that state of being closer to source and closer to pure love, or what we can best describe as pure love.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned crystalline beings too. Crystalline.
Yeah, the nature of 4D life is that instead of us, so you and I sit here, we're seeing each other through this technology, and I have skin that's on this bone structure and muscle and sinew and tendons and blood and vessels and capillaries and all this stuff, right? That's not the case. At the end of 3D, the 3D vibratory rate, which is organic, sort of like from 4th grade on up, everything is either crystalline based or plasma based. And crystal, to use different words, is energy, it's light. So the composition of, we could look at each other and see our physical forms, and you could see your face and my face, but we would look more translucent, and we wouldn't have bones and muscle and blood and sinew and tissue. It would be all composed of light. So think of crystalline as energy or light based.
And you've interacted with these beings too.
Yeah, well, and I've interacted in that form myself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to. I only have a glimpse of this, but the closest that we come as human beings is when, if you will, a man and a woman join together and make love. That's the closest approximation that we can have to sharing ourselves with another being. In the higher dimensions, as an example, instead of my right hand holding my left hand, we can do that in the higher dimensions, but we actually, our hands infuse each other because we're made out of light and energy. We can actually blend each other's energy. And so if you think of the beauty of organic physical love, you can quantify that times 10 to who knows whatever power, because it's more powerful because it's light and energy in its purest form, which is way cool. Yeah, it's like, people use this analogy. It's like that scene from the movie Cocoon,
mm-hmm.
where Steve Guttenberg's in the pool.
Mm-hmm.
And she comes over to him in her energetic form, and he's like, wow. It doesn't even approximate to what he really felt.
Sure.
Yeah, but that's a really good example of how different it is.
I can tell by the smile on your face that you've had firsthand experience.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Wow. It really is.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it's and that's just scraping the surface. There's all sorts of differences. People living in the higher dimensions to a great degree are not that much different than us. They feel, they love, they evolve, they grow. Here's a good one. A higher dimensional child is not created in the same way we create an organic child. A man and a woman, or two people who simply love each other, two higher dimensional people who love each other, would simply face each other, one across from the other, looking into each other's eyes with love and intention, and intend to create a child. They would raise their hands up, like I'm doing now, together, and sort of create this sort of, cupping with their hands. And so you have person on the left, person on the right, raising their hands up, cupped. And with intention, they would intend to bring forth a new life form. And by the time they are done bringing their hands down, they would come down to about just sort of like below their waist. And you would see what would look like a 6-month-old human child in form, size, and shape.
Wow.
Boy or girl, whatever they wanted to create. Mm-hmm. And they can intend whatever they want to. They can intend that it has blonde hair and intend that it has dark hair, whatever it's going to be when it gets older. But this is the way. And interestingly enough, sometime roughly like 2 years ago, I heard somebody else telling the same story about how higher dimensional life is created in the fifth dimension. And went, yes, confirmation. Because I had heard it from my people.
Yeah, sure.
I was communicating with Andromeda, who's a higher dimensional communicator for the council, and she was telling me the story about how children are created in the fifth dimension. I was like, wow, that's cool. And all the women are excited, like, great, we don't have to wreck our bodies anymore.
So that leads me to wonder, what would be the use of gender at that point? Why would there be male and female, or why would there be several more genders? Or it seems interesting that there would still be. Yeah.
It's my understanding that, again, when you get above mid-level fifth, people are more just people and androgynous, and less orienting themselves to one sex or another. But
gotcha.
The people to 3D become 4D, become 5D, if they're to follow an evolutionary path. But if you look, if you will analyze us as our pure form, to get back to your question of 10 or 12 minutes ago, not only do 3D organic ETs visit this planet, people who are still organic, but are highly more evolved than us, emotionally, technologically, aware of their own spiritual connection to source. So you have these 3D organic people visiting Earth. You have these higher dimensional people visiting Earth. One of the reasons that we are evolving at the pace they're evolving at right now is that we are learning, if not by proof, but by discovery, that we are not this physicality. We are part of Source. We're born of Source. So, Source creates, as Mark Kimmel would say, godlets or creator gods, which create oversouls. Out of these oversouls come us, these little, if you will, pool balls or peas we were spit out. And that's the source of who we are. We're these little light orbs of intelligence, sentience, and consciousness. That's really what we are. We're energy and light that chooses to live this organic form for the sake of experience. Experience is plural, for the sake of learning. And everybody's experience is different. Mine's different than yours, who's different from your wife's and anybody else. We're all unique and different. I could sit 10 of us in a room. We may have some similar views, but to each of us, they're going to be different about how this experience is happening. Sure. And I think the biggest challenge for people who wake up to this knowledge and more is, now that we know this, what do we choose? How do we choose to make our lives matter on this planet, to make a difference while we're here? A lot of people in this greater Sedona area choose to be healers. I've done some of that energy healing work. It's pretty profound when you watch it evoke change in people.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my path. My path is to, I guess, to speak like I do now, to help, to educate, and to bring people together to help awaken more people. Because when I produce these conferences, it's amazing to watch what happens when people who had never met each other before come together, and they're all of a sudden there's like a new brother and sister, a new brother and brother, a new sister and sister who had never met before. One's from Kansas, and another one from New Jersey, and another one's from Atlanta, another one's from California, or Italy, or England, or Germany, or France, or all across the globe. I get people from everywhere. So that's, if you will, that's the reward for me, to see people come together and share their stories. And I'm going to be changing somewhat the structure of my conference and having less speaker lecturing. The speakers will still speak. They'll still share some of what they know, but I'm going to have a lot more interactive time of the people in the audience having far more interactive time with the speakers. Because over the course of years that I've been doing this, I've learned that some people have questions, but predominantly they want to tell their stories. They really, really want to tell their stories. And I want to provide an enjoyable and safe ground and community for people to do that. That's why conferences still prove to be valuable, because people can get out of their home state and go meet people who have very, very similar interests that they wouldn't typically talk about in Kansas or Oklahoma or Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, exactly. That's a fantastic service and forum to provide for people.
Yeah,
you do that.
I've been doing it for the past 4 years now, and it's really, really rewarding.
Fantastic.
I know that there's some other things that I'll do in my life, but I'm continuing to do these conferences, and it just brings me a lot of joy to be able to bring people like this together. And I typically open each conference on a Friday with sacred Native American ceremonies, and I probably had upwards of 20 natives this year, and I think 10 or 12 of them were under the age of 12. Ron, who's Curzon Indian from Southern California, is married to a Yavapai girl. There's a Yavapai Apache reservation close by here. Ron's responsible for a large group of young children. So he brought all of these children over in native and Indian regalia, and they sang the celebration song and a couple of other songs, and all the people at the conference were like, wow, this is amazing. And we had, I had the usual, I had like another 5 or 6 different people, including Annette Moody, Itzana Ray, Rogelio, Hilaha Homa, Clifford Mahudi, that all spoke on what they know about this time that we're in, the star beings, star ancestors, about medicine. So it's
sounds fantastic.
It's a great way to go through life.
Yeah, definitely.
Very, very rewarding. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that sounds like a good note, maybe, to draw this to a close. And maybe you could sort of tie this all up by telling people how they could find you, or maybe where they could go to find out about these events that you hold.
Sure. Okay. I'll take the first question. If people haven't heard about the work that I've done over the past 7 years, since 2011, they can go to the Andromeda Council.com website. So it's spelled just like the Andromeda Constellation or Andromeda Galaxy. So Andromeda Council, COUNCIL.com. Mm-hmm. If they want to learn about the conferences and the one-day special events that I produce, they can go to transformationalshiftevents.com. And if they want to write to me, they can write to me at Tolec@AndromedaCouncil.com.
Fantastic. When is the next event?
I'm doing an event in May, which I'm really excited about. It'll be a one-day event called First Open Contact. And the supposition is whatever bad guy ETs that have been influencing this planet, they've been dealt with. And we are clearly aware of the fact that our lives are about to change because there are also benevolent ETs that are here. How will the people of the developed nations of this planet the US's, France's, Germany's, England's, Canada's of the world, developed nations. Certainly China's in there. Because all the indigenous people, they know about the star ancestors. So they're fine. It's all of the people who will be sort of like, the deer in headlights for the first time. Those folks.
Mm-hmm.
What can we anticipate will be their reactions? How will we handle this knowledge? How will the educational systems change, the political systems, the financial systems? What are all of the potential areas of impact? We're going to try and do that in a day. I don't know if we're going to do that or not, but I've got some pretty amazing people that I'm pulling together to have that discussion. And that will be 35 to 40 minutes of each speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And so all those speakers will go to about lunchtime. And then after lunch, when they come back, the whole afternoon is audience and speaker interaction. I'm going to do it sort of in half circle or around.
Nice.
So it's highly integrated and really give the people a chance to dive in, ask all sorts of questions, and be an active part of the discussion. So I'm very excited, very, very excited about this.
Cool. Sounds fantastic.
And if you'd like to come on out, would love to have you join us.
Oh, I'd love to be able to do it. If I can, I will definitely do it.
May 5th, May 11th in Sedona. So it's the 5th month of the year. Sedona out here, that time of year, it's like 82, 84, blue skies, puffy white clouds. No, lousy weather.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. It's great.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I'll include the info for that on the notes for this episode. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, Tolec, thank you so much for doing this. It's been highly enjoyable and informative.
Oh, Chris, thank you.
Well, that was a very interesting conversation. It was highly enjoyable. Tolec was very, very polite and warm and friendly, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I hope that I'm hoping that we'll be able to do it later on this year and kind of continue where we left off. What I am doing with this podcast is I am assuming that, and maybe I'm naive in assuming this, but I'm assuming that it will reach people that maybe are just starting to get interested in these kinds of topics. And hopefully it will serve as sort of a bridge or an introduction into some of these things. And so I'm having these guests on my podcast as if you were discovering them just as I am. And so we're kind of starting at the basics, starting with the origin stories, for lack of a better way of putting it, but it's kind of what it is. So you get to see more of where these people come from, what their context is, and how they got into looking into the things that they have spent their lives or most of their lives looking into. I find that in and of itself fascinating. And then there's the actual content. And Tolec's content is just mind-blowing because, as I stated in the introduction, there's not really any reference points for any of us when we're hearing this stuff. So, you may be apt to fall to either extreme. You have a gut reaction that it's a bunch of bullshit, or you have a gut reaction that as otherworldly, no pun intended, as it sounds, that there's actually some truth to what he is saying, if not, not complete truth. So, yeah, it's very provocative to talk about things without reference points. And you, in these cases, you just I shouldn't say you're either or. I don't want to mean to boil everything down to a dualism by any means, but some people are apt to be open-minded and will give anybody a sit down and a listen. And there are people that once you go outside of certain boundaries, spoken or unspoken, it's nonsense or it's not even worth, pondering. Either because it's already been debunked or it's not even something that science should spend a good deal of funds and time pursuing because, what does it have to do with the price of milk? So that makes it so easy for huge, vast areas of existence to go unheeded because it's not put on our radar by the people that we look to put things on our radar. That's why we have to look to ourselves and give ourselves more credit for our experiences. Just some thoughts to throw out there. Anyway, we'll be talking more to Tolec probably before the year is out, and I look very much forward to that. Okay, if you like this podcast and you can see where I'm trying to go with it, and you like what I'm doing, and you would like to support it, I have a Patreon page, which you can visit at www.patreon.com/themeltpodcast. And you can go there, and there is really what I have for exclusive incentives there at this point is some video versions of some of the interviews that I'm doing for the podcast. And I believe at least one or two that are on there now are podcasts that haven't come out yet. So there's that. I'll be working more on those incentives as time goes on, and I'm open to suggestions for sure. But yeah, that's where you can go to support it. You can always spread the word through your various avenues of social media. And if you have any suggestions or guest ideas or feedback at all, you can email me at themeltpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. I very much appreciate it. Until next time.